Okay, so yeah, good morning to all of you, and let's begin today's lecture. Let me just check that the voice is on, the recording is on. Okay, yeah. Okay, so in the last lecture, we basically started the main course material, and we explained that why is it that we're interested in this notion of languages, right, and grammars. It's because any problem, right, any task that you want to perform using computer, it can be expressed as a language inclusion problem. Right? So we showed this reduction from an arbitrary task to computing a function, and then from computing a function to computing a specific type of function, which is called a decision problem, and then from decision problem to this concept of language inclusion. Okay, so this means that so the main problem that we're interested in is that we are given uh, so we are given an alphabet, right, which is just a set of symbols, and you can create arbitrary strings using this alphabet, where a string is just a sequence of the symbols of the alphabet. And then we have a language, right? So a language is a subset of the set of all strings, right? So we denoted the set of all possible strings that you can generate using an alphabet by sigma star. Right? So sigma is the alphabet, then sigma star is the set of all strings that can be generated, right? Uh, now subsets of sigma star, right? Which will be sets of strings. These are called languages. Right? And the main problem is to determine that if you're given an arbitrary string, whether or not it belongs to the subset, right? So whether or not it belongs to the language. Right? So in the last lecture, we also saw some very basic operations involving strings. So we saw this notion of the string power notation, right? And the string concatenation. And we had just started on this notion of set concatenation, right? Where if you're given two sets of strings, which means you're given two languages, what's the concatenation of these two languages, right? So the concatenation of, so if you're given two sets A and B, then this concatenation AB is simply defined to be the set as shown right in the slides, right? Where so you take any arbitrary string from A, you take any arbitrary string from B and concatenate them, right? And you do this for all strings which belong to A and B. So that's the set concatenation AB. That's how it is defined. Okay. So are there any questions regarding the last lecture? Okay. Okay, so let's continue. Okay. So just a couple of announcements. Right? So the office hours where I will be available right, are today. Right? Generally, they will be on Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. So they are online on the class line. So I'll be online, and if you have any doubts, questions, clarifications, suggestions, anything, right, then please feel free to drop, right, and we can discuss. Okay. And we will also have TA office hours, and specific groups of students will be assigned to TAs. Right? So all of this will be decided by the end of this week, so that from next week onwards, the TA office hours will also start, and you can also ask your doubts and clarifications to the TAs. Okay, so let's continue with today's lecture. Okay, so let's look at a couple of questions pertaining to the set concatenation. Right? So what is this concatenation? Right? So let's say that so the first set of strings is the empty set phi, and the second set of strings is AB, comma BA. Right? So what would be the concatenation of these two sets? Anyone? So remember how set concatenation is defined, right? So you take strings from the first set and strings from the second set and concatenate them, right? And you do it for all possible strings from the first set and the second set. Okay. Okay. So I have a couple of answers. So one is 5. Okay. Yeah. And okay. Yeah. So that's correct, right? So yeah. So a number of you have told 5. That's correct. Right? So since there is no string in the first set, right? Uh, that's why the set concatenation, right, of these two sets would also be the empty set. Right? So it would also be phi. Right? But in general, this is true for any set of strings. Right? So if you take any set of strings, if you concatenate it with phi, then you will get phi itself. Right? So phi is also called the annihilator in this context of set concatenation. Okay, let's look at this question. So now I'm trying to concatenate these two sets, right? Where the first set contains the empty string, which is epsilon, and the second set contains AB, BA. So what would be this, the concatenation of these two sets? Okay, okay, so yeah, okay. So number of you are saying it would be AB, BA, which is the second set, right? And so why would that be the case? So why is it that you would get the second set? Okay. So, okay, yeah. So number of you are saying that epsilon is the empty string and epsilon concatenated with any string gives the string itself, right? So that's what we saw in the last lecture, right? So since epsilon is the empty string, if you concatenate it with any other string, then you'll get the same string. So in this case, right, if you want to find the set concatenation of these two sets, right? So you will take epsilon and you will concatenate it with AB, so you'll get AB. Similarly, you will take epsilon and then you will concatenate it with BA and they will get BA. Right? So that's why the set concatenation of these two sets is ABBA. Right? And this is also true in general. Right? For any set of strings A, if you concatenate it with the set which only contains epsilon, then you get A itself. Okay, good. So let's look at this notion of powers of set, right? So we have seen powers of symbols, we have seen powers of strings, right? So what's the power of a set, right? So this is very similar to what we saw for symbols and strings. Right? So if you're given a set A, which is the set of strings, then the powers an, right, of this set are defined as follows. So A0 is defined to be the set which contains the empty string, which is epsilon, and an plus 1 is obtained by concatenating an with A. Right? So if you think about this, right, so A0 is epsilon, so what would A1 be? Right? So A1 would be A0 concatenated with A. Right? So A0 is epsilon, so you'll get epsilon concatenated with A, which as we just saw, right, is equal to A itself. Right? And then A square will be equal to A1 concatenated with A, which is A concatenated with A. Right? So there you'll basically take any string of A and concatenate it with any string of A. So that's why so that's how you can get all the powers of the set A. So let's look at an example to make this more clear. So if you take this set AB, BA, right? So this is a set of two strings, AB and BA. Then AB, BA raised to 0 is, as we define, it's the set which contains the empty string, right? Which is epsilon. Now ABBA raised to 1, right? So this can be written as ABBA raised to 0 plus 1. So now we can use the formula. So that would be equal to ABBA raised to 0 concatenated with ABBA. So this is epsilon concatenated with ABBA, which is equal to ABBA itself. And ABBA square, right? So this would be equal to so this would be equal to ABBA concatenated with ABBA, right? So here you will basically concatenate any two pair of strings, right, from these two sets. So you get ABAB, ABBA, BAB, and BABA. Right? So that's how you can define further powers of set of strings as well. Okay, so now that we have defined power of strings, let's also define power of set. We can also define this asterate of a set. So this asterate of a set A star is nothing but the union of all finite powers of A. Okay. So this A star formally is defined as the union of an for all n greater than or equal to 0. So you take all possible powers of A finite powers of A, right? And then you simply take a union of the resulting sets, right? So this would be equal to A0 union A1 union A2 and so on. Okay. So so what can we say about this set, right? So is this set always going to be infinite? Let's say, okay, so is this set or let's first ask this question, right? So is this set finite or infinite? Or can we make any general statement? Okay, so for A equal to epsilon, it is finite. But what about for everything else, right? So Vinith is saying that for A equal to epsilon, it is finite. So that is correct, right? So if A only contains epsilon, then obviously it's going to be finite. But so what happens if there is any other string in A? Okay, for any other set, it is infinite. Yes. So there is also the empty set to consider. Right? So so this empty set 5 star, right? That would only contain epsilon. Right? So that's also finite. So the empty set would be its asteroid would be finite. If your set only contains epsilon, it would be finite. But for any other set of strings, it is going to be infinite set. Okay. So equivalently, we can also define this A star as follows, right? So this is just expanding on the definition, right? So since in the definition, we are computing arbitrary powers of the set A, right? So in essence, what we are doing, right, is that we are basically picking some n number of strings, right, from A and just joining them together, right, or concatenating them together. And this is done for any arbitrary n and for any arbitrary collection of strings from A. Right? So we can say that A star is equal to the set of strings x1, this concatenation, right? x1, x2 up to xn, right? Where this n is some positive integer, and these xi's are obtained from A. Right? All of the xi's are obtained from A. So you take, so you pick all possible. So you take some number of strings, right? Some strings from A, and you join them together, right? And you do this for all possible strings from A, and you get A star. So, are there any questions regarding the asterisk of a set? Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so remember that we use so this asterisk is denoted by the star notation, right? But we saw the star notation before as well, right? Where it was used to represent the set of all strings of an alphabet. So given an alphabet sigma, we used sigma star to denote the set of all strings of an alphabet. Right? But now we are also using this star symbol to denote the asterisk of a set of strings. Okay? So notice that both of these definitions actually sort of match with each other. Because if you consider, so what is sigma, right? So sigma is a set of symbols. So if you consider each symbol as a string, then the asterisk of this sigma star is again going to be the set of all strings that you can generate using the alphabet. So that's exactly what we defined the sigma star previously. Okay, so if you consider each symbol as a string, then this matches the definition of the asterisk of a set of strings. And this also explains why we said that this 5 star is equal to epsilon, right? So this 5 star would basically contain the all the powers, right? All positive powers of phi, right? But phi raised to 0 would be equal to epsilon, and any other power of phi is going to be is going to be the empty set, and that's why this 5 star would be epsilon. And so note that so we've used so given a symbol A in sigma, right? It can either denote the symbol or the element A, or it can denote the string A. So this depends on the context on which we are using this particular symbol, right? So you can always figure out, right, whether or not it's so whether the small a is actually a symbol or it's supposed to represent a string. Okay, so I think that concludes the introduction on the part of. So we've got the section on strings, right, and string operations. So now we can move to the concept of deterministic finite automaton, right? So this is the first class of machines that we're going to see in this course. Right? This is also the simplest class of machines, right? So remember that we defined this machine, right, to be an abstraction, right, of an actual real world system, and a real world computing system. And in general, a deterministic finite automaton is an abstraction of a machine with finite memory. So let's first look at intuitively, right, what a DFA is, and then we will see more formal definition. Okay. So as I said, this is a model. It is an abstraction of a finite memory machine. So there are two important concepts that you need to remember, right, when you consider DFAs. So these are states and transitions. Right? So DFA consists of a bunch of states, and it also consists of a bunch of transitions. Okay. So what's the state? Right? So the state can be considered. So it basically, so the state is the abstraction of the memory. Right? So it contains all the necessary information about the machine at some point of time. So you can think of it as a snapshot of the machine, okay, frozen in time. Okay? So if you take, for example, a computer, right? So if you take the RAM, right, the memory of the computer. So this is so the RAM is going to contain what is the program that's currently running, right? And what are the various what are the various data that's stored at different locations. Okay. Uh, so the state is basically just that, right? It's basically the snapshot of the machine. Okay? It's frozen in time. Okay. So let's say that you stop the computer, right, at some point of time. Uh, then you get the state of that machine, right, which is the state of the memory of that machine. Okay. And and Okay, so I think there was some connection issues because of which I lost the connection. So I'm not sure what was the last slide which everyone was able to see, right? Um, so if someone can, so did we cover so did we cover the intuition behind the DFA? I think that this one everyone was able to get, right. So let me just start over from the formal definition itself, right? Uh, okay, so this DFA is given by a phi tuple Q sigma delta S and F, right? And this Q is a finite non-empty set of states. Okay, I see. So I see. Okay, thank you very much, Vinny. Okay. So this Q is a finite non-empty set of states. Okay. So let's look at what sigma is. Right? So sigma is the input alphabet. Okay. Uh, right. So why do we need an input alphabet? So we are going to use DFA in order to solve the language inclusion problem. Right? So which means that uh, we are so we have given this input alphabet sigma, right, from which we can generate different languages, okay, which are nothing but sets of strings, right, or subsets of sequence of the sigma star. Uh, and we are going to use the DFA in order to recognize a particular language. Okay, so we are going to say, okay, if you're given an arbitrary string from sigma star, does this string belong to the language L? Right? So that's why we associate the input alphabet sigma with a DFA. Okay? So next is the transition function. So this is the second important component of a DFA. So let's look at the signature of this transition function. So this delta is defined as this function whose domain is q cross sigma and whose codomain is q. So what this is saying is that uh, so it associates. So if you're given a state q and a symbol a, let's say in the alphabet sigma, then it associates another set. It associates another state to this tuple. Okay? So this basically means that if you're in some state, okay, and you see some symbol from the input alphabet, then you will transition to another state of the DFA. So that's why this transition function is defined as this function q cross sigma to q. Okay. And next we have S and F, right? So S, which belongs to Q, is a specific start state, right? So this is the start state of the DFA, right? So this simply means that when you switch on this machine, right, or when you begin the computation, right, on a DFA, then you will begin from this specific start state S. And this F, which is in general a subset of Q, is the set of accept or final states, which means that so if you're given some string, right, you begin from the start state, you're going to process that string using the transition function, right? And and finally, right, when you finish processing the string, right, you will end up in some state. So if this state is in the set of accept or final states, then the string would be accepted by the DFA, right? And that would define the language that this DFA can recognize. Okay? So we'll see this in a lot more detail, right? But for the moment, let's just focus on the formal definition. Right? So this consists of 5 tuples. So this is a 5 tuple. This consists of 5 different components: Q, sigma, delta, S, and F. Okay? Uh, so let's look at this transition function in a bit more detail. Okay. So as I said, this transition function takes 2 arguments. Right? So it's a function from Q cross sigma to Q. So it takes a state and an input symbol, and then it determines next state that the DFA is going to go to. So this delta Q comma A is going to be the state that the DFA goes to when it is in state Q and the input A is received. Okay. So think about this functioning of the DFA, right? So let's say that so you're given a DFA, right? You're given a set of states, right? And you begin from the start state, okay? And you see and you see some symbol from the input alphabet. So then you're going to use this transition function in order to move to the next state of the DFA. Okay? And then you're going to keep on doing that for the subsequent symbols that you see. Okay? So in order to make this more clear, right, let's look at the graph representation of a DFA. Right? So this is a bit more simpler to understand in the formal definition. Okay. So in this graph representation of a DFA, the states of a DFA become nodes of the graph. Okay. And the arcs, right, or the edges, they represent the transition function of the DFA. Okay. So this means that if you have an edge, right, from state P to state Q, or from node P to node Q, right, then this is labeled by all the input symbols that have transitions from P to Q according to transition function. Okay. So this means that if let's say if delta P comma A is equal to Q, then you are going to have an edge from P to Q, and it's going to be labeled by A. You do this for all possible input symbols. Okay. So let's look at an example, right? And the start state. So this is the special state, right, from which the DFA is going to begin its operation. It's going to begin its execution. So therefore, this is going to be indicated in the graph representation by an incoming arrow without any source. So we need to distinguish the start state, and we will do this by adding an incoming arrow uh, to this state, right, without any source. And the final states will be indicated by double circles, right? So this is the second distinguishing set of states, right? That we need to somehow represent in this graph, right? And these are the final states, and they will be indicated by double circles. Okay. So let's look at an example to make this clear. So here is a DFA, right? So this DFA consists of three states. Right? So the states correspond to nodes of the graph. And as you can see, right, so in the state Q1, we have an incoming arrow, right, but without any source. Okay, so this means that Q1 is the start state, and and if you consider the states Q1 and Q2, right, so these are nodes which have double circles around them. Right? So this means that Q1 and Q2 are also the final states of the DFA. And then you have edges between these nodes, right? And these edges are being labeled, right? In this case by 0 and 1. So this means that 0, 1 is the alphabet, is the input alphabet of this DFA. And you can figure out the transition function, right? From the way that the edges are oriented between the nodes and from the labels that they have. Okay. So let's also look at the formal representation of this DFA, right? So that we can see, right, how does the formal representation match with the graph representation. Okay. So formally, this DFA is given by this tuple Q sigma delta Q1 and F. So let's define what each of these things are. Right? So this Q is the set of states, which in this case is simply Q1, Q2, and Q3. Sigma is the input alphabet, so as we just said, right? So this input alphabet is the symbols from the input alphabet are going to label the edges of the graph, and in this case, it is 0 and 1. So Q1 is already the start state, right? So this is in the phi tuple itself, right? Where we have specifically said that Q1 is the start state, because in this case, in the graph representation, it has an incoming arrow without any source. The set of final states are given by Q1 and Q2 because these two states have double circles around them. Okay. And so now let's look at the transition function. Right? So this transition function is defined for every tuple, right, of a state and a symbol. So in this case, you have to define delta for Q1 0, Q1 1, Q2 0, Q2 1, and Q3 0 and Q3 1. Okay? And in this case, you can directly see what each of these tuples are, right? What the delta for each of these tuples are from the diagram itself, from the graph itself. So delta of Q1 0, right, is going to be Q1 itself, because there is a self loop, right? There is an edge from Q1 to itself, which is labeled by 0. So that's why delta of Q1 0 is equal to Q. Delta of Q1 comma 1. Right? So here I take Q1, right, in the graph, and I look at the edge from Q1 that's labeled by 1. Right? So that goes to Q2, and that's why delta of Q1 comma 1 is equal to Q2. let's look at what delta for Q2 is, right? So delta for Q2 comma 0, right? So here I look at the edge from Q2, right, which is labeled by 0. So there is an edge from Q2 to Q1, which is labeled by 0, and that's why delta of Q2 comma 0 is equal to Q1. Similarly, delta of Q2 comma 1 is equal to Q3, right? Because there is an edge from Q2 to Q3, which is labeled by 1. Delta of Q3 comma 0 is equal to Q3, and delta of Q3 comma 1 is also equal to Q3 because there's an edge from Q3 to itself that is labeled by both 0 and 1. So in general, right? So in the graph representation, the states become nodes, and the start state is indicated by an incoming arrow without any source. The final states are indicated by double circles, and you basically add edges between two states, right? If they're related by the transition function, and the labels of the edges become the symbols, right? Through which the transition happens. Right? So are there any questions regarding the graph of a DFA? Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so as I said earlier, right? So we are going to use DFA in order to recognize, right, or in order to solve the language inclusion problem. Right? So this DFA uh, is obviously going to accept some language, right, from the 0 1 star. Right? So 0 1 is the input alphabet. 0 1 star is the set of all possible strings. Okay, and if you're given some string, right, you're basically going to execute, right, the DFA on that string, beginning from the start state, and you will see. So you will execute the DFA using the transition function, right, and you will end up in some state, right, when the string is completely processed, and when you end up in a state, if that state is a final state, then the string is accepted by the DFA, right? Otherwise, it is rejected by the DFA. Right? And the language of the DFA would be the set of strings that's accepted by the DFA. So all these things we are going to make more clear as we go along. Right? But let's look at this DFA. Right? So this DFA, what is this DFA doing? Okay. Um, is it so? First of all, what's a string that's accepted by this DFA? Okay. So I'm asking a very simple question, right? So what's an example of a string that's accepted by this DFA? So just give me one string. Right? So for example, okay, so let's take the string 0. Okay, so if you just have the string 0, is it accepted by this DFA? So in order to find out whether or not a string is accepted by the DFA, you simply run the DFA on that string. Right? So if you begin in start state Q1, right, and you process 0, then you end up in the start state Q1 itself, right? In the state Q1 itself, which is also a final state, right? And therefore it's going to be accepted by the DFA. So 0 is accepted by the DFA. 1 is also accepted by the DFA because 1 would transition you from Q1 to Q2. Okay? But again, Q2 is a final state, so that's also accepted. So what's an example of a string that's not accepted by the DFA? Yes, thank you. Yeah, so it's 1 1, right? So if you look at the string 1 1, right, then yeah. So in order to process the string 1 1, you will again begin from Q1. Okay? So you will process 1, you will go to Q2, and then you will process 1 again. So you will go to Q3. Okay? But the string is over. The string, you have finished processing the entire string. You have ended up in the state Q3, and the state Q3, right, is not a final state. So this means that the string is not going to be accepted by the DFA. Okay. So, okay, so 1 1 is a string that's not accepted by this DFA. What's another example of a string that's not accepted by this DFA? Okay. Okay, so I have, so Vineet is saying that any string that has two consecutive ones, 1 1 as a subsegment, is not going to be accepted by this DFA. Okay, so that's actually correct. Right? So if you take a string of any arbitrary length, right, as long as it has 1 1 as its subsegment, uh, so there are consecutive ones in the string, right? Then those consecutive ones are going to take you uh, to the state Q3, right? And from there you cannot proceed, right? So you will remain in Q3, uh, which means that such a string will not be accepted, right? So this DFA is basically accepting all those strings which do not have consecutive ones in it. So that's what this DFA is doing, right? So it's accepting all strings without two consecutive ones. So we will, so in the later lectures, right, we are actually going to prove this formally as well. But I just wanted to give you a taste, right, of what are the kind of languages that are accepted, or what's the language that's accepted by this DFA. So in particular, right, we will actually show that each of these three states are accepting very specific types of string, right? So for example, the state Q1, if you're in the state Q1, right, then you've processed some prefix of the string. Okay, so what this is saying is that the prefix or the previous string that you have processed is okay, right, which means it doesn't contain consecutive ones, and you also know that it does not end in. For the state Q2, you know that the prefix that you have processed, right, is okay, which means that it doesn't contain consecutive ones. And at the same time, you also know that it ends in a single one, right? Since the very last symbol that you just processed was one. Okay. And finally, if you're in the state Q3, then you know that consecutive ones have already been seen in the prefix of the string. So it's okay if you don't understand this fully now, right? So we are going to do this much more formally and in great detail, right, later on. But this is just a taste, right, of how we are actually going to show that this string accepts all strings, that this DFA rather accepts all strings without two consecutive ones. Okay. Okay, so let's also look at, so we have seen this formal representation of a DFA, you have seen the graph representation of a DFA. There's another representation which is useful, right? Which is a transition table. Okay, so this is only used for representing the transition, right? Rather, I mean, you can also express the setup states, the start states, final state, and so on using this transition table representation. Okay, so what is this representation? So here. The rows of the table are the states, right, uh, of uh, of the DFA. The columns are the input symbols. Okay, and we designate the final states, right, with the star around them. Okay, so in this case, Q1 and Q2 we know are the final states, so that's why these states have stars. And finally, we have an incoming arrow, right, for the start state, which in this case is Q1. And the entries of the table themselves are the transition function. Right? So they are the representation of the transition function. So in this case, so if you are, for example, in row 1, then you know that for Q1 and symbol 0, the delta of Q1 comma 0 was Q1. So that's why we have written Q1 there in that cell for Q1 0. Similarly, Q1 and 1. Right? So in the cell corresponding to Q1 and 1, we have Q2 because delta of Q1 comma 1 was equal to Q2 and so on. Okay. So this is another alternative representation of a DFA, right? So you can express a DFA formally, you can express a DFA using a graph, or you can express a DFA using the transition table, right? So all the three representations are complete, right? It means that they do represent, they do express all the information that you require about the DFA. Right? So they express the set of states, the input alphabet, the start state, the final states, and the transition functions themselves. Okay. Okay, so now that we have defined what a DFA does, right, on a single symbol, right, of the input alphabet, we also need to figure out some way of formally representing what a DFA is going to do on a string, which is a sequence of symbols from the alphabet. Right? So for that, we define this notion of an extended transition function. Right? So we describe the effect of a string, right, on a DFA by extending delta to a state and a string. So this delta is a function from Q cross sigma to Q. So it takes a state and a single symbol of the input alphabet, right, and it gives another state. So we are going to extend this so that it now takes a state and a string, which is a sequence of symbols from the input alphabet, and it's going to give out another state. So we're going to denote this by this symbol delta hat. Right? So delta hat is basically the extended transition function. Right? It's a function from state cross strings to state. Right? So it's a function from Q cross sigma star to Q. And this is defined inductively as follows, right? So this delta hat of Q comma epsilon. So epsilon is the special string of length 0. So delta hat of Q comma epsilon is defined to be Q, and delta hat of Q comma WA, right? So here WA, right, is some string, right? Where W is a string and A is an element of the input alphabet. So we have basically, so if you're given some string, right, whose length is greater than or equal to 1, we have divided it, right, into a prefix and a suffix, where the prefix is W and the suffix just consists of the single symbol of the input alphabet, which is A. Okay. So delta hat of Q comma WA is defined recursively. Right? So it's defined as delta hat of Q comma W comma A. So what this simply means, right, is that if you want to process this string WA, right, from the state Q, then you first process the entire string W from the state Q. Okay, so that's delta hat of Q comma W. So you will end up in some state, and then you process the input symbol A, right, the symbol A, right, from that particular state. Right, so that is delta hat Q comma W comma A. So W is a string and A is an element of the input alphabet. And in order to process WA, you first process W, and then from the resulting state, you process A. Right? So that's how we are going to process a string. Right? So we are going to move from left to right. Okay? So we are going to prefix. So we are going to process the entire prefix, and then from the resulting state, we are going to process the remaining suffix of the string. So are there any questions regarding the extended transition function? So no, so Vineet is asking that whether or not both W and A can be a string, right? So both of them cannot be a string. Okay, so this is the reason is that if you look at the definition, right? So on the right hand side, right? So this delta hat of Q comma WA is defined to be delta of delta hat of Q comma W comma A. So this means that delta is part of the formal definition, right, of the DFA. So this delta only takes as input a string, a state, and a symbol, right, of the alphabet. Right? So that's why this A can only be a symbol, right, of the alphabet. It cannot be a string. But this delta hat of Q comma W, so this delta hat in general can take a string as well as an argument. So yeah, any more questions? Okay. Right. So as I said, right, so this is the intuition behind this extended delta. So I already explained this, right? So this extended delta is computed for a state Q, right? And some string, like let's say A1, A2 up to AN, right, by essentially following a path in the transition graph. So you start from Q, right, and then you process each of these symbols A1, A2 up to AN in that order, right? By basically following the transition function, right? Which in this case is following the edges, right, or the arcs of the graph with the labels A1, A2 up to AN. Right? So you begin from the state Q in the graph. You take the outgoing edges, which have been labeled by A1, A2 up to AN, and in the end you are going to end up in some state. So that will be the delta hat of Q and this string A1, A2 up to AN. So this is another way of thinking about this delta hat. right, or this extended delta following the graph representation of the DFA. Okay. And here's an example, right, of this delta hat that is computed, let's say on Q1 and 011, right? So I have we've shown the tabular representation, right, of this DFA. Right? This is the same DFA that we saw earlier, right? Which is the DFA which only accepts strings without consecutive ones. Okay. So let's say we want to calculate delta hat on Q1 and 011. Okay. So the way you do this is that you simply apply the recursive definition of delta hat, right? So in this case, right, if you want to let's see what we're doing in the first step. Right? So if you want to calculate delta hat on Q1 and 011, so you will first you'll first look at the 011, right? So you're going to designate the prefix and the suffix. So the prefix will be 01, and suffix must just consist of a single symbol, right, which is in this case is 1. So we'll first calculate delta hat of Q1, 01, and then on the resulting state, you're going to apply delta, right, with the argument 1. Okay, so this will be delta of delta hat of Q1, 01, 1, right, and then we'll keep on doing this recursively. Right? So in order to calculate delta hat of Q1, 01, you will apply delta hat on Q1, 0, right? And so on. Okay. So if you keep on applying this definition recursively, then finally you will end up in the state Q3. Okay. So delta hat of Q1, 011 will be equal to Q3. Right? And in fact, if you can do this on the diagram as well, right? So beginning from Q1, right? You follow a path, right, which starts from Q1 and which is labeled by 011, and you will also end up in the state Q3. So that's how we can basically determine, right, how the DFA is going to process a given string using the extended delta function. Okay. Okay. So with that, I'll end the lecture today. Yeah, and thank you.